Hi, welcome back to another episode of the On the Ramp podcast.
Hello.
And hello.
Hello.
We have a Chew the Fat, Nath.
Yeah, we do. And I'm excited to talk about this because this is a subject close to my heart.
And very important subject.
Yeah. And
So we're going to chew the fat on the importance of front of house.
And who are we with, Alex?
Subject to change, the title is. We are with my sister today,
Oh.
Hello.
Emma Lindley. Yeah.
Cute family outing.
Yeah.
Keeping it in the family and...
We're keeping it in the family. And to be fair, I'm always mindful when somebody, a family member comes in and they just got a role because they're a family member, but not on this case. Emma is completely justified in her role because I've seen her in action and she's elite.
The real deal.
Elite, yes.
Yeah. And it's funny with that family dynamic because you have to battle against that a little bit, as you all know. We're a bit older now, so we've kind of come out the other side of that. But yeah, no, it's very well deserved. And very recently, you've gained a position on the board as the Customer Experience Director.
Yes.
Which is, in plain terms, it's more of a sales director role, but with a focus on making sure that the customer experience is as good as possible. So every touch point that the customer has falls under Emma's control, essentially. So do you want to just quickly, without me, we've already probably introduced you kind of, but do you want to just do a quick introduction and why you're sat here today, essentially, just in 30 seconds?
Yeah, so Customer Experience Director since earlier on, start of this year. Prior to that, ran 2 separate locations, one after another, and then prior to that, assistant manager and service advisor.
You're banging your hand, aren't you?
I know.
Yeah, everyone bangs their hand.
I forget how much I talk my hands. Ran 2 branches before, assistant manager before that, and then service advisor prior to that. So a lot of experience.
Every role within the business.
Yes, on that front counter.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to chew the fat on front of house.
Yeah.
Which we all know, for a garage to be really successful, has to really take advantage of that role. It's such an important role. It doesn't matter how good your technicians are. It doesn't matter how good you are at the actual product itself, which is fixing cars. If you don't have that really strong front of house team, it's very hard to portray the value.
As soon as you step outside of a 1 or a 2-man band and you have somebody hosting that desk for you, that key exchange, the invoice handover, that becomes a game of hospitality. If you ask me, I think it's something that requires a certain awareness and a certain game face to be on all the time. So it was natural to bring Emma onto it because what she's doing with you guys at the moment is quite incredible in regards to how she's broken down this induction, let's say, of a new staff member coming in. So I'd love to ask a few questions around that and tell me what your thought processes are.
I think for context, how many people are in the front of house team? What are you looking over? Must be 20
to 30.
20
probably
30.
now 30, close to 30, yeah.
Yeah, and we're obviously a growing business, so it's recruiting and inducting people correctly on that process quickly as well. And there'll be people listening to this who perhaps know they need that quality front of house.
Yeah.
But it's really difficult to find.
Yeah.
It's even harder to train up to a point where you feel like you can leave them to it, or the point they're adding value or doing a better job than you. Because typically speaking, as a business owner, you're probably going to end up at some point on that front counter. You become the face of that business, don't you? Which is a very familiar feeling to a lot of people. So it's how do they come out the other side of that? And how do they find that right person? What does that right person look like? Do they need to be technical person? Do they need to be non-technical? You mentioned the term hospitality there. My mind immediately goes to things like restaurants and hotels when you mention that. Yeah. And it's that how that person makes you feel, isn't it? When you've had those good experiences and those bad experiences. And it's not necessarily the amenities or the food or the service. It's how that person makes you feel. And why is the motor industry any different from that?
It's not at all. Well, if anything, it's infinitely more important because often it's a purchase that somebody doesn't want to be making. And how strange is that you were hosting something and we have to host it so well that because the customer doesn't want to buy it, we need to almost treble down on how we make that person feel. So the next time they have to buy something car related, that we might be considered for the next time.
We spent a lot of time in the recent training that we did talking about reducing customer anxiety, and that's a massive part of that job role, I feel, just because, like you said, not many people want to bring the cars to the garage. They don't want to be spending money. Sometimes it is a distressed purchase that they haven't anticipated, and a lot of the service advisor role is to reduce that anxiety as much as possible. And that's things like when your customer's ringing you for an update, that shouldn't happen. We should absolutely be on the forefront with that, because a lot of the time the customer is waiting around, or they're just waiting for that phone call with a cost, or they're waiting for something. And that front of house, their main priority, I would say, is absolutely reducing that customer anxiety, whether that's from how they explain the process when they're checking them in, or throughout the day when they're seeing them out. It's all reducing the customer anxiety and making them feel better about the experience than they were initially anticipating.
Yeah, and I suppose there's going to be levels to this, because there's obviously people listening that are a relative scale to wherever they're at within their journey, and somebody might not have ever got any front of house. They might be front of house only. So how do they start with finding the first front of house, and what does their version of good translate to when they're offering it as a job role and job description? So what would somebody...
Well, I think a lot of people struggle because they're looking for that technical person straight away, because a business owner very typically has the technical knowledge, and they probably leverage that knowledge a lot during those conversations with customers. And don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing to have. It's obviously a good thing to have, but it's extremely difficult to replace. If you've got 20 years of knowledge, how do you replace yourself on that front counter?
I think there's a customer comfort in knowing that they're dealing with the owner as well, because that's where the decision... they're the decision maker for that, so they control everything. If you put a customer service advisor, controller, somebody that's technical or non-technical, that customer still has this feeling that somebody above might be able to override that, and if I don't feel comfortable with that person, I could override.
And I don't think you're ever going to get away from that.
No.
Customers are always going to, and I'm sure we can all sit here and think about a business that we use where it's critical that you're dealing with the business owner. For example, where I get my hair cut.
Yeah.
He spoke about getting someone else in to help out, and I was like, well, you can do that, but I'm still using you. So, but in our game, you've just got to get over that. And of course, there will be customers who will want to speak to you, but most of the customers, if they get looked after,
yes,
do you know what I mean? It's not going to be that much of an issue.
So if you can translate what good looks like into a description that somebody can thrive under, rather than sort of feel compressed, then certainly that's.
Yeah, I think like you speak about your hairdresser, do you call that barbers? But like with auto centres, you might only be there once a year. Your relationships with one person aren't going to be super long standing. You're going to see that person once a year. If you deliver really good service when they drop their car off, it's quite unlikely that they're going to ask to speak to the business owner if they are that kind of customer. If they are a customer where they're a trade customer and they're bringing in loads and loads of cars, then yes, they might want to speak to the business owner. But from just a normal consumer bringing their service and MOT in, it's highly unlikely that they're going to have those sort of relationships with people in the branch, I'd say.
I think as soon as you go down that path, you realise that actually people are okay without you being the one serving them.
Yeah.
Because like you said, as long as the values and whatnot stays good around it.
Yeah.
A point you mentioned earlier about reducing the anxiety and the fact that this is a distressed purchase and no one really wants to come to a garage. There's one other major negative to what we do, and that's most of the time it's not even a tangible. You can't see what you've done.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't even feel what you've done.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't want to go. You can't see what's been done. You're really anxious about it. There's a severe lack of trust.
Yeah.
And the only person that can affect all of those things is the front of house.
If that front of house gets it slightly wrong, then all of a sudden that can quickly go from I've paid some money, my car's done, now doing what it should be doing, to possibly have they done anything?
Yeah.
Which we've had accusations of.
We get it all the time.
Yeah. Have you changed my oil?
Yeah.
And we're making processes for potentially not having a great process from the front of house in the first instance. But what does, again, have to go back to the fact is, like, how do they know to make something look good according to all the stakeholders which are involved?
So what does, it's getting more into like the practical side of setting up a good front of house team, then do you want to start with you? Do you want to speak out the structure that we have typically in a branch? Like, what does good look for us in terms of setup?
Yeah, so comfortable for me, looks good in a branch is you're going to have your branch manager, assistant, and then your third service advisor. So that puts 3 people on the front, but your manager acts as your workshop control. So technically 2.5 really active on the front counter with customers.
And how many techs would you have for that?
6. Try and stick to 1 front of house to 2 technicians.
Right, okay.
You could do it a bit less, but we tend to find now with the balance and the organisation and what we expect from a front of house, they need quite a bit of time.
And this is something that we've touched on before, but like some businesses are quite wide in the premise that it does all makes all models really well. But it stops at a certain level before it gets too deep. And then there's other people that do things that really deep, but on a specific
like programming, real technical stuff.
But they'll limit themselves effectively to a certain set of manufacturers or specialisms in some respects. So it's a bit easier to have people on a basic fundamental understanding when you're at one side of it. Potentially the wider is generally the consensus. But then when you get quite narrow in how deep and technical you get, there's got to be some level and probably some one-to-one interaction, like we certainly.
But I don't think you should get technical mixed up with a fundamental understanding of how to fix a car because you're a qualified mechanic.
No, absolutely not. No.
Able to take information from mechanics and have a understanding, because Emma, you're non-technical, but most of you have a fundamental understanding of most of the stuff that we do.
I do, but don't get me wrong, when I first stepped on that counter as a service advisor for the first day, I remember getting an MOT certificate and it had like an exhaust failure on there, which at that time I deemed the most scariest repair, because I was like, I don't know what an exhaust is, don't know how many parts it comes in, no idea, totally blew my mind. And then when I built a bit of confidence in the role, and then I thought, this isn't a technical role, if I just get the information and relay that, it's me that's going to make a difference to the role, not the information that I'm delivering. So I quite quickly realised that I didn't need to be super, super technical. I needed to know the facts and I needed to know the timescales and I needed to know the price. And that they were the only things I needed to know.
You're
I didn't know.
Translating it into a solution, aren't you?
That's it. If I can deliver the solution, whatever I do customer service around that, that's what changes the experience, not necessarily the solution I'm providing. I very quickly learned that you didn't need to be that technical in this role if you were just willing to find out the right information.
I suppose a good way to look at it is you need to be slightly more technical than the customer.
That's it.
Of which most customers don't care. It's just a car.
And then you meet the occasional.
You're going to meet the occasional one, but as long as you fall back on technical at that point.
And something we touched on when we were speaking earlier, as long as you've got the awareness to say when you're potentially might be running out of your depth, and you say to the customer, like, right, at this point, my knowledge stops, but I will endeavour to search out the answer as quick as I can.
Absolutely.
That customer has that instant respect gained back.
Know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people struggle with that, unfortunately.
But this is unfortunately where, and often I find this when I've had people I've worked with in the past, there's a fear, although they won't say it, there's an insecurity or a fear of looking inadequate, that they can't do the job. And I try and stress, and probably don't give off the best signals for that previously, where I'm absolutely fine with them not knowing. I just need them to be aware when they don't know, and don't knee-jerk to an answer that isn't the right answer.
That's a cultural thing, isn't it? From a leadership perspective, making
100%.
sure they understand that.
And throughout my journey, I've got that wrong in places, and now sort of really sort of like slow it right down.
I think just a point, Emma, and you mentioned our structure. One of the reasons why we lean to that 3 front of house is for holiday. Because it's not ideal, but you can operate on 2. It just means that some of the housekeeping processes are going to stop
slightly
for a week or 2, and then when the third person comes back, see the whole point of front of house is that you aren't worked every hour of the day. Like the natural flow of customers is that, there are swells and then there are downtimes, and there's this natural flow through the day where you see your customers come in the morning, your VHCs come through mid-morning, your authorization happens between mid-morning, lunchtime, and then your work gets done in the afternoon. And if you get it all right, that period just after lunch before the rush hour, that should be relatively down. And I know, Emma, one of the things that you're really good at is in that downtime being proactive to take those tasks away from the future.
We speak about this in the training last week, that you probably spend 60% of the day in that day, but the other 40% you need to be thinking about tomorrow. And it's what can you do in that 40% of time is going to make tomorrow the best it can be. If you're on the back foot and you're working 100% right up within that day, when you arrive the next day, you're not ready, you're going to miss opportunity, you're not going to have all the information there for the customers. When we talk later about service plans and things like that, that's when that 40% really comes into play. And if you're really efficient during that 60, then you can make the most out of your next day with that 40.
Yeah.
I suppose if you spend all your time just firefighting and not getting ahead of the day, the only thing that's going to suffer is the customer experience, isn't it? Because
it is.
You run out of time and you end up not giving the time to the customer. And if we think of what we spoke about earlier, the only thing that they can normally value the transaction on is that it is that interaction. And if your front of house process isn't, so if we talk practically about what some of those things are, it's ordering the parts for the next day. Right, get that done in that downtime.
I would literally have that done by 8 o'clock the morning prior to the day. So the first job of the day is to order parts for the next day. Let's box that off and forget it.
Give you chance to, if anything's got to be transferred,
Yeah.
it gets done.
Anything's not available, anything's wrong, you need to shop around.
Comes damaged. There's so many things.
So you're ordering parts for the following day, the morning, the day before?
If I was a service advisor, I would get in and what I would say to them, order your parts, the first job you do. Before you even start seeing customers in, order your parts for the next day. And things like Garage Hive integration really helps with that. Because you don't need to ring anyone. You can just fly for your orders and you can have it done in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Nath, what's your structure like? I know you're going through a bit of a change at the moment.
Yeah, so going for a bit of a change and in my infinite desire to try and solve every problem to everyone and believing that I can push past most things that other people can't, I thought I can go really deep and quite wide for myself because I switch caps quite well.
In terms of
as in
every make and model, but specialise.
Diag everything.
Okay.
And that's through my just desire to want to learn and solve everything, and I'll eat as much as I can. But that 40% of the day has never existed for me throughout growing the business. What I've then done is I've brought people in thinking that they would be able to be Superman like me. That then proves points that it's unsustainable for an amount of people, and it actually isn't that fun or fulfilling. So we've now looked at it in a slightly different way, where we have a reasonable sized staffed business that we want to sort of departmentalise things. We toyed with the idea of like allocating technicians to front of house, but would become quite flawed because they would end up misallocated for certain things, and that creates confusion. So we thought about departmentalising it, so we'll have one front of house that looks after the Diag jobs. Yeah. We'll have one front of house that deals with the fleet. We'll have one front of house that deals with the MOTs throughout the day.
I really like that.
And then another one that will deal with the any service and repair jobs. So everyone sort of stands their ground, and then we'll chase the schedule effectively. So we'll look to the schedule and see where, if there's any completed jobs awaiting its next task, or is there any VHCs that need confirming, and then we've got each other's back. But knowing that my job today is to hold down on the Diag, my job is, and everyone's got a bit more awareness and sense of accountability within that. Yeah. That then sort of allows the technicians to filter through to the person that they might, without just going, because we used to get it all the time where a technician would come in and is like, this part's wrong, and you were never the person that was working on the job, but the only person that wasn't on the phone right now. It just creates just this ultimately a hostile environment in the end, because technicians desperate to get the things sorted so they can get onto the next job. Front of house is trying to get the next job booked in, and you just end up in this never-ending cycle. Yeah.
On the Ramp is very proudly sponsored by Castrol and the race group from Certus Energy. Our own business, Lindley's Auto Centres, has been using Castrol products via the race group for at least 10 years. We get our own account manager. They help us set up the oil portfolios across the branches. And there's also someone to ring if we've got any technical queries or general queries. And having that relationship with the account manager, I think, is really important. We get dual branded workwear. So just like what I'm wearing now, we get this free for all members of staff. We get to use the Castrol brand across our entire business. So things like building signage, websites, general marketing, etc. And working with a globally recognized brand like Castrol, I believe, can really elevate your own brand. There's a rewards platform. So for every purchase, we accumulate points that we can redeem against certain items on this reward platform, which is pretty cool. And then there's an integration via our garage management software that allows us to actually see the exact oil product code that should be used in that vehicle, which in today's world and the complexities of oil is actually really helpful. So if you want to learn more about how Castrol can help elevate your business, and you want to learn more about how the race group can help you, then please click on the link in the description below. Thank you. That fleet fit, the allocating specialisms specialist responsibilities,
Yeah.
I call it. That's really interesting. Leo did that with fleet, didn't he? When we went over to his place,
Yeah,
we met his fleet manager, which, when you think about fleet as an operation, is quite complex.
Yeah.
Like you'll deal with 10, I don't know, as an advisor, you might deal with, let's say, 8 customers in a day, and 7 of them are retail customers. That one fleet is a completely unique transaction.
It's a completely different
Totally
level
different
of
process.
expectations as well. It's a completely different expectation, and it's just something.
Drawing the value out of the job is completely different as well.
Of course, and how you get it authorised, and sort of like the way that you have to dip in and get an authorisation this way quicker if you do it this particular way.
Yeah.
It requires a knowledge and, again, probably an experience and a grading and an understanding to sort of say that I can deal with fleet, I can hold fleet down. Somebody could cover fleet, but they're not going to grow fleet if they're covering it.
Yeah.
Somebody that's there to run
Push
fleet,
it.
runs fleet, and so,
Yeah.
right, I know how to grow it, and then I can offset any extra work that I've got or potentially grow a team out of that.
We have done something similar at Lindley's though, without realising really, because with multi-location, all our fleet comes here.
Yeah.
Most of our diesel diag will come here at Colic, and that's intentional for that same reason, same experience, same sort of knowledge. We don't offer fleet everywhere, even though we could.
Yeah.
It makes more sense for us to have it in one location, to have way better control over it. So even, without doing that, we kind of have done it unintentionally slightly, I think.
Well, the fleet thing was absolutely, definitely intentional, because the systems behind fleet authorizations,
Yeah.
you don't want to teach 30 different people on how to work that system.
Especially if you're only going to use it once a month, because it's the repetition is what we're trying to get, and
you lose efficiency.
Yeah,
don't you?
and the thing is, we think about all of this is not only do we want to give the employees the best experience of seeing things that they can achieve all the time, but it's the customer that feels the bite of an inexperienced member of staff trying to solve a problem they're never going to solve. So then we lose the customer.
Yeah.
So it's just a double negative, or it's a double positive.
So moving on then, how do we currently recruit into front of house? So it's quite a common conversation in the forums, very popular question. Can't find front of house. I know, speaking on Lindley's behalf, that we have a lot of success on Indeed with front of house service advisors when we're looking for that non-technical person.
Yeah.
So put an advert out on Indeed, we do the Facebook stuff, we do the usual stuff. But because the structure of the business allows for that, for us to focus more on the attributes of the person as opposed to the knowledge of the person, that opens up massively, doesn't it? And we've recruited some exceptional front of house people now who could walk into any garage and be a fantastic service advisor, who 6 months ago had never worked in a garage before. Yeah. And that's because their attributes were really good.
Their hospitality skills are
really strong. Yeah. And it's allowed us to emphasize and focus on that as opposed to focus on technical. And anyone out there at the minute who's looking for that front of house person, and don't get me wrong, you may be in a position where you need someone technical, because the business owner might not be technical, or there might be circumstances around it, but at least consider getting that non-technical person in.
How many of your branch managers are technical, would you say?
We have one.
Or easier to say non-technical?
I'd say most aren't.
Yeah,
most aren't technical.
About 50-50, I think. But it depends what you say technical, like hands-on technical, could fix a car.
Well, I mean,
I would say I'm technical, and I never repair a car, so I'm technical in the understanding that I hold a conversation.
Yeah.
I'd call technical. So we've got branch managers now that could hold a conversation technically.
Yeah.
But they've never fixed a car in their life.
Yeah.
I'd call them not non-technical backgrounds.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I would refer to technical as someone who has had hands-on technical experience, i.e. qualified mechanic. If we look at some of our our most experienced branch managers, they are now very technical. Yeah. But they absolutely weren't. Everything that they are speaking about is passed on knowledge, not, hands-on experience.
Do you find like their customer success has been quicker and is more successful because they're non-technical?
Well, it's different with managers, isn't it? Because management, you need in equal measures leadership, people skills, and customer service, and they're not always the same thing. No. So we've got some people who are very good with people, not necessarily the best salespeople. So they're not always handed. Now that's just a whole. If we're talking about managers, that's a whole different. That's
and
a whole
that's
different
our
game.
managers, isn't it? Which is general workshop controller, branch manager. I know some people have branch managers who are different to workshop controllers.
Yeah.
I feel like a workshop controller may need to be a bit more technical because they are, seeing jobs through the workshop. I think that's important for them.
It comes down to trust, doesn't it? If they trust the team,
Yeah.
then you don't necessarily need to be technical because you can take the advice of the team. But if there's a lack of trust there, they could be manipulated by the technicians, essentially.
So what does your guys' recruitment process look like? You say you have massive success on Indeed. Is there a method that you guys use on Indeed that works well?
We've worked very hard on our Indeed profiles, reviews,
your company profile,
adverts. Yeah, so it looks the part. It feels professional. The advert's not full of like frills. It's a very matter of fact advert, but we emphasize on the family element. We emphasize on some of the perks being in this business. And then the requirements aren't overly heavy, because it's when you're recruiting, the end game is obviously to employ somebody, but when you're going out to market, you want people to apply.
You want to spark conversations.
You do, yeah. So you've got to think about, you don't want to put all of these barriers up, and I think like technicians suffer more than this, because if you have this advert out for a super technician, what you're actually looking for is somebody who thinks they're a super technician. Because they're confident enough to apply for a job that is spec'd this high. We all know someone who is low on confidence but extremely capable. So you've got to be quite careful, I think, with the language in these adverts, that you're not putting someone off, because for them to apply, that's what they have to think they are. Yeah. And that's not always the case. So we keep the adverts relatively sort of low spec, I'd say. Okay. And then there is a qualifying process. So we have someone at head office who screens through, whether that's phone call screening or just straight looking at the CV. Then it goes through to recruitment stage, interview stage, which we weren't very good at previously, but now the branch manager will be involved in that conversation, because if they're joining a team, you want the person who's going to be managing that person to absolutely be responsible for recruiting that person, which is absolutely key. Yeah. So again, if you're a business owner and you have a service manager and you're employing in front of house, get the service manager bought into that front of house person.
Don't just present them with.
No, I think we felt some pains the other way.
Well, you were on the receiving end of that.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, we recruited someone at the start of the year. They did really, really well. Started to have some issues in branch because I'd got so heavily involved with the onboarding. Every time that member of staff did something wrong or didn't do something correct, they're on the phone to me. Yeah. I think you need to come down and do some more training. And I'm like, right, he's been in the branch a month now. You are the manager. I can only do so much of that. Yeah. So we've tried to restructure the way we are onboarding now.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So the interview process, is it a one stage or a two stage in person?
I think it depends on the person.
Yeah, I think,
and the role as well.
If we speak about just front of house, if we talk about a senior, like a management, that would be a multi-stage. Right, okay.
Yeah. I think we have done somewhere, we've just done an interview from head office base, just interviewed them, and then if we're really keen on them, maybe getting them back for stage 2 interview with the branch manager, and then just making sure their relationship's gonna.
Mine differs a little bit different. Mine is through Indeed as well, but I use the smart sourcing, so I don't promote the advert. I smart source and link it to the job. So I'll send effectively smart sourcing at the minute is you can seek a brief overview of what candidates look like and go, oh, this person looks good, this looks good. And then we define the role as service controller, which is a little bit different to service advisor, because we go a little bit deeper. And it's not to say that person must be technical. It's obviously an advantage for the person, but in reality, I was not technical when I started, and my win came from the fact that I was super hospitable. So we do it that way, and then for front of house, we do a 2-stage process. Well, we do a screen call, and then we do a 2-stage process. One is a bit of a fact find for the person and for us to work out whether this is something that we both want to engage with. So it's a bit of a, you ask us questions, we'll ask you questions, and this makes sure it feels right. And then if we feel like that's something and their interest is still high, then we go to a 2nd stage, which is they present to us, because naturally they're presenting information to customers. So we want to see how they present with actually a small brief, which is just say, tell us who you are, what you're about, where you've come from, what you know about us, and how you might see yourself.
How have people responded to that? Because that's like high pressure.
High pressure, but in reality, for us, because we go quite deep, we need that. We need that person to go, I could step up to that, and we'll quickly work out, because I'd rather not employ someone for a month
Yeah.
To then not know, they'd be right. This is a high pressure environment. This is dealing with customers that want to know something that actually that you might not know the answer to. The customer certainly doesn't know the answer to, but they're demanding an answer, and you don't want to lie to them. So you've got to be able to stand up at that point. And if not, we found that it works more for us than against us, because we might lose someone that might be low confidence but needs building. But the whole premise of the fact find is to make that potential candidate see the vision of the company. When you see the vision of the company, confidence is naturally increased.
That's something we've got to work on. It's something we are actively working on, actually. Not been particularly good at. Moving on, because we've got quite a bit to speak about. Again, a real practical thing here. Diagnostic bookings. The booking that you can get wrong so easily, and it has such a knock-on effect for the day. Do you have a special diagnostic booking process?
Yeah. It's interesting that Garage Hive have got the new delivery things that helps.
The questionnaire.
The diag questionnaire. But we have a specific set of questions that we would like to ask, which come up on a predefined set of comments.
Yeah.
So you select.
So when you make the job.
Yeah. So you select diag as a job type, then bang, here's a load of questions.
Yeah, we have
which pretty much generalise all diags to a reasonable level, and then you can almost lead yourself to round pegs in round holes if it's a specific diag. But then that should be enough on the phone to justify what sort of allocation is required. And they are then trained to know that this is an assessment only. You aren't getting the diagnostic. We're doing an assessment which often can lead to a diag, but might require more time to be sold.
Yeah.
And as soon as you get into that sort of flow, you can win more often because you've managed everyone's expectations from the start.
I know ours is a work in progress, relatively new process, but what are we aiming for?
Yeah, so a little bit similar to that. We started with the predefined comments within Garage Hive. So every time you created that job, it asked the same 5 questions, which might be, the light, describe the fault, can we recreate it, that sort of thing. But now, since the questionnaire, we've just started doing that. We've had really, really good success with that. The staff love it. So every time a diag's booked in, they get sent this diagnostic questionnaire, which is the same pretty much. I think it's about 10 questions. Now, I would personally say the customer has to fill that out to confirm their booking. If the customer's not willing to provide us this information beforehand, we're probably not going to be a right fit for the customer, because we need to answer these questions. We are going to come back to them at some point and ask for them anyway. So if they can't provide it to us prior to the booking, then the branches are well within their right to cancel that booking, I'd say. Yeah. So if the customer comes back, fills in the questionnaire, we're fairly confident we can then diagnose the fault. They stick to their original first investigation of that 1 hour, which is the diagnostic charge for that. And then we'll give them a cost of repair or further investigation from that point onwards.
Would you say that it, like in some instances, because I think how I would feel if I was the customer on the receiving end of such diagnostic questionnaire, how I would feel if I hadn't filled it in because I am a lunatic and forget everything all the time. What is the prompt for that customer? Don't
get me wrong, they're absolutely not just going to be cancelled and that be it. When we do the day before work, if the customer hasn't responded to the questionnaire, they will then bring the customer up and maybe ask them the questions. Do you have 5 minutes to provide us with these answers? Or can you have a look through the questionnaire and give us these answers at drop off? We're going to want the answers to these questions at some point. We have to have them. If we've never seen the vehicle and it was serviced last month, or it's not been serviced for 5 years and their DPF light's on, it's going to tell us a whole new story than if we didn't have those answers. And not only that, the technician's going to be knocking on our door. Have you asked the customer this? Have you asked them that? Is it on the job?
The tech can see this information.
The tech can see the information, so it's really from when they're on their job card, they can see related questionnaires to that specific job, so they can be in the workshop. They don't even need to come and ask you. They've got all the answers there in them.
It's a win-win, isn't it?
Yeah, to be honest, we allow technicians to see their jobs tomorrow, so they can start thinking about how their day's going to play already. So if they have that information there, they can start fixing it the night before, really, in their head, or work out their steps to fixing that vehicle.
We have a bit of a tooling issue across the company. We have so many sites. Majority of our tools are at one location. If we need a tool for that particular diag, we need to source it before the car comes in, make sure it's nice and efficient. But when we spoke earlier about customer anxiety, this is one of the things we don't want to. If we're not a right fit for the customer, they need to know that. There's no point us getting their car in, looking at the car for 2 hours, not knowing what's wrong or having the equipment to do it or knowing where to take that job next, then we feel like we can't charge for the job, and then we've wasted a day of the customer's time.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've gained nothing, we've gained nothing. We've both left the situation unhappy with how it's played out. So it's how to, make sure we're a right fit for that customer and they are for us, but then how we can efficiently get it through the workshop.
And on the flip side of that, like you said, when a customer's not right, I've noticed the one thing that I've always been keen on is never closing the door on the customer, and always offering that customer where they would be better suited going next.
Always.
And that's always one of the skills that I've always tried to bring into a good front of house. That's what that looks like. If you don't do the work, or we don't want to do that particular work on this particular vehicle for this particular customer avatar, it would be great if that customer was recommended somewhere they could go, so that customer felt they leave feeling like the door wasn't closed in their face.
And don't get me wrong, if it's a long-term customer and it's Mrs. Jones and we've serviced a car for the past 6 years and an injector's failed, it might be that we collect and deliver her car for her to the local injector specialist we would recommend. It would never be a close the door on that customer. We'd always try and do right by them, but sometimes doing right by them is just giving them the honest answer. Don't overpromise and absolutely underdeliver, because no one wins in that scenario.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, moving on to the next question I've got. Actually, the next topic we'll speak about is around customer surveys, net promoter score, reviews, etc. Reviews are top of the absolute list in terms of marketing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you Google yourself today and you've got less than 4.5, people will see that as bad.
Well, there's amber flags.
Yeah. If you don't have 4.8, I'd be aiming for 4.8. And you want consistency.
Yeah.
1 review per week is more than enough. So you need a really good review gathering strategy that is entirely done on front end. So the front of house person is the one who will earn the review, and they're also the one that will get the review in terms of just asking the question. So if you look at your front of house team now, I would incentivize, 100% incentivize positive reviews or positive surveys or something along those lines. If you use Garage Hive, it has a built-in review strategy in terms of you send a survey, you get a positive survey back, it's going to ask the customer for a review.
Yeah.
Very clever the way it does it, and it just very quickly adds up to lots of good reviews. But if you're not using Garage Hive, you need to look at your current GMS and see if you can create a strategy to get those reviews, because there'll be nothing that will have a bigger impact on acquiring new customers, converting new customers than those reviews. So if it's not a focus today, make it a focus of your front of house team to get those reviews over the line.
Absolutely. We've got little service advisor cards now that they can write their name on. So that explains they're going to get an MPS member of staff to write their name on. It's just a bit more of a personal touch, like they're asking it for them. It's not they're leaving a review for the bigger company. It's you're leaving a review for that person. It's a little bit more personable. We get some nice reviews like that. It's always nice to get a shout out to a member of staff. Makes them feel really good. So they were a nice little touch for our receptions.
Really
like them.
That's really good.
Next topic is service plans. Emma, this is a project that you've been heavily involved with Lindley's for what, 2 or 3 months now, maybe 2 months.
June we started.
Okay, 4 or 5 months. So just want to explain what it is that you're doing, how you're getting over the line.
So service
and the why.
The why. So service split are obviously affiliated to you, so good one for us to use.
Nice little plug.
We've put a lot of work in this year about customer retention. How do we know we're retaining customers? How do we go about retaining customers? What can we give our customers that's going to stand them out to all the others? Our really loyal customers that have used us every single year. Service plans obviously ties in really, really well with that. In competition with the dealer, we know that's what they're offering. We want to be able to offer something similar. So we went on board with service split in June. Now, it was a very... not necessarily a cold start, I want to say, but it was, you can tailor it to however you want to use it. So the benefits are specific to your business, the pricing specific to your business. There is nothing around the platform that tells you need to sell something in a particular way. So we went down our normal fixed service pricing. We offered additional things for the customer, like free puncture repairs, free fluid top-ups throughout the year, and then £10 discount off the standard pricing. We tried a few different ways to market this. First initial one was the mail shot to all our existing service customers. So a text message and an email explaining what we were now offering.
It was just email initially.
Just an email initially for them to register their interest online. And I think we overnight got about 250. straight away, email, phone numbers, registrations, contact me, I want a service plan was pretty much the information we had back.
Yeah.
So then it was me and another girl in head office, worked through this list, just literally cold calling customers, building them bespoke quotes for their vehicle, whether they had or haven't used us in the past before, and then sending them the plan. Worked really, really well for us because we just started it at a random point in the year. It wasn't around people's service dates. It can be tailored between anywhere from 6 months to 36 months.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter whereabouts in the year. As long as you are 6 months away from your service, you could set up a plan for that, which, tend to work really, really well for us. We then went down to training in branch then. So how are we going to get the advisors to sell it in branch over the counter? And this is what we struggled with most, and I think other people will probably struggle with, because I know when I'm doing the job, I will go above and beyond to do absolutely everything to capture that customer. But I totally understand it's not always at the forefront of everybody's mind. So then what can we do to make it the front of their mind? So we did things, posted in receptions, adverts on our TVs. We got leaflets made so they were given to customers when they collected the vehicle. But the really key point I was trying to get across to our staff is this doesn't happen when you see the customer out. This happens when the customer drops their car off. You have to plant that first seed then, because you need to give them all day to think about it, and you need to get it across the line when they collect their car, not start the conversation then. So we're really encouraged to... I did an exercise where we emailed all the customers the day before, let them know we were now doing service plans. They've been identified as a good candidate. We had all the quotes ready in branch. So when we saw the customers in, we could explain it, give them the quote, give them time to think about it throughout the day. If they signed up before they collected their vehicle, they then got £10 discount off that service today. I think we had about 50% conversion rate with that, which I was really, really happy with. And then we've tried some other methods, which were cold calling based off the back of positive NPS. So if they left a positive NPS today, they'd get a phone call tomorrow. We didn't get a chance to speak to you yesterday, but you left us a really good review. We've looked through your history. We identified it'd be good for you. Can we send your plan over? So we've tried quite a few different avenues now. I think we're close to 140 plans.
Okay,
so yeah, really, really happy with how that's gone. But it is a constant reminder. You know.
Are you sending plans out and people aren't fulfilling on those still? Is that a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could have the conversation and the customer's like, yeah, can you send me some information?
Yeah.
And then it never converts. Or they wait till the final reminder after 4 weeks and then hit the convert button, which has also happened.
Yeah.
I think just on Emma's point as well, that customer retention on service work is like super critical.
Yeah.
But also customer acquisition. So we've had customers sign up to service plans that have never used us.
Right.
So to emphasise that this is for some customers, especially if in our customer acquisition strategy, we want customers dropping out of the dealerships.
Yeah.
It's just a continuation of the norm, which is service plan.
Yeah.
So they keep the car for that 4th year, drop out the dealer network, service plan's finished. Where can I get my next service plan?
Yeah.
And again, you think about the free puncture repairs. Well, there's not many puncture repairs on a car in a year.
No.
And half of them are going to be a new tyre anyway. So the cars come back to the garage as well. So there's a health check involved in that. But it makes the customer feel like they're part of something. Makes the customer feel like they're getting more, which is the right thing. And we've had customers literally ask us, why are you doing this? Like, what's in it for you?
Yeah,
like,
my favourite thing is, do you have a service plan? Like, this is what I say to all my service advisors. When that customer's ringing in to book, ask them if they have a service plan.
Yeah.
You know what the answer is going to be. They're going to wonder why you're asking. And I had such a perfect example of this the other day. Because I was working on the counter in a branch, customer rang up, can I book in for my service? I said, do you have a service plan? Well, yeah. I mean, no, I don't. But I do bring my car to you every single year. I mean, what's a service plan? I didn't know you did service plans.
Yeah.
By the end of that phone call, I'd sold the customer the plan and they signed up at the point of booking for 2 weeks' time. And that was just so the perfect example of just asking a question.
So on that example, you've sold him for next year's service.
For next year's service. So I booked him in for 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
And then sold him a plan for next year's service.
Perfect. What an execution.
and that customer is then part of the club. It's like a membership, isn't it? Almost.
I absolutely love that theory.
Yeah. And, you know, we've got a booking coordinator, Penny, who works in our head office. Now, she's quite good at generating leads for us. So when she's just taking a booking, she'll often say, do you have a service plan? Now, she won't necessarily try and sell it, but if the customer expresses interest, she will say, right, I'll get someone to give you a call with more information. And we get quite a few leads that way, which is nice.
Anything to add, Nathan, on service plans?
It's something that is such a key tool for retention, and something that we're just implementing into our business. We've got lots of other things that we've been rounding up at the same time. So for us, it's not hearing all of this is really resonating with me.
I do want to say, just while we are speaking about it, I know there's a bit of like scariness to introduce it and maintain it. And I think that's what I've learned doing this. It is a constant. And when we look at dealerships and their service plans, I have no doubt that when they onboard someone to join a dealership, it is drilled in them from day one that is part of their job. We're introducing something that isn't part of someone's job. They don't see it as part of their job. They see it as something extra we're asking them to do. And I do think it will take time for it to really embed into people's existing staff, which is when I've got 2 new starters at the end of this month. Now I'm quite excited to see their progression when it comes to this.
And this is the norm.
Because from day one, this is their norm, and it's the first opportunity I'm going to have to do this with staff. So making it their norm from day one, I suspect or anticipate they will probably have more success than staff that have been with us for really, really long that are reluctant to make change.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and something that I keep thinking about as us business owners evolve and constantly add new things into the business. And as soon as we bring the new person in, they're going to get it all at the newest version. How do we have a reinduction process for the old members of staff, the old guard, the people that we value for their experience but don't value them for their intuitivity to jump on the new stuff? So
it's continuous training, isn't it?
It is.
And this is exactly what it should be, but it should be a good feeling for them to constantly become reinducted into the business.
That's what I've heavily focused on this year, and particularly where we've grown as a company. We've inherited different staff at different times that were from existing businesses that we've taken over, and it's giving myself particularly peace of mind that everyone knows the message. Everyone knows what we're asking them of them every single day. And this year for me, it's been really aligning that focus, getting all the branches together, getting all the front of house together, delivering that refresher training to a point where I've come to now, where I'm fairly confident everyone knows what's expected of them. So I can bring a new starter in and it's fine. But then I'd still schedule, when we've asked staff for feedback how often they want this sort of training, they've said every 4 to 6 months, for a refresher on the system, on processes, anything new. And, that's been pretty much the common theme with that. So I think staff do want it, but it's just, having someone being able to do it.
It's the time, isn't it?
And
it's
the time,
a lot of time. Just on your point about staff, it becoming the norm for staff, I think there's a really good comparison to draw here with it also becomes the norm for customers.
Yeah.
So if you look at someone who's trying to implement online booking into their 3,000 customer base who've never booked online, it's going to be a slow start. But then every time someone does it, they're going to learn how to do it, and then they're going to do it the following year. Then you get this compounding effect where before you know it, 30 to 40% of your customers are booking online, and they won't want it any other way.
No.
Yeah. Easy.
Whereas service plans are going to be exactly the same.
Yeah.
You're now trying to teach a load of... The reason I thought about this is because you mentioned that in the dealerships, the staff are born into this environment that sells service plans.
Yeah.
But so are the customers.
Yeah.
Like if you're a customer that's lived in that dealer world, the odds are that you've had a service plan. You know what it is. It's the language that is understood. If you are a customer who owns a 4 to 10-year-old car who's never had a new car, never had a service plan or a warranty, what's a service plan? You're like teaching them a completely brand new concept.
Yeah.
So as customers come to expect service plans, those conversion rates are going to increase, and then the repeatability and the retention of that customer is going to increase.
Absolutely.
So it's early days for service plans in the independent sector, but I think in the long term game, it's going to be really important. One of the last questions that I want to ask, well, there are 2 questions actually. I think you can both summarise this for me. So Emma, you can go first. First question is it a sales role? And then the follow-up question is, how important is the role?
It is the most important role. And it is a sales role. I would say absolutely is a sales role. You are selling someone a solution to their problem. And people might not think the solution is the sales, but it's how you can communicate that to a customer for them to trust you enough for you to provide the solution. And that goes all the way back from technicians' inspections to what's on them to then the actual conversation that's having to the customer. So yeah, the most important role.
You can't say I think the same.
Okay.
So Nathan, front of house.
Retweet.
Yeah, retweet.
No, I think given that we're a bit more of a narrow business, for us, it's not only the most important role; it's the hardest role. Like I'm not downselling this. I think the front of house, I commend all the great technicians out there that will do all this really, really hard work. But unless you have somebody at the front to be able to sell that at a rate where that customer feels completely at ease with the business, with the brand, we've been able to hand the key over and just say, sort my problem out. I trust you guys. It's without doubt the hardest role. It is purely how you offer up the solution and how that experience is put together. So yeah, it is exactly that. Obviously, as a result of that and how good you are will determine how many sales you make. So sales is a result of how good the service is that you're offering. I tend to look at it as not rather than sell as many of these as you can, because all I'm asking that person to do is try and sell. What I'm asking them to do is offer up the best service that they can, bring in all the variables, create a unique experience for each individual driver, and then a result of that will be sales. And how good that sales is a result of how good you are at that job. And we will provide all the support, all the awareness that we can around that, and as much leverage with technologies and supplier support and fellow employee support as we can to make sure that that's good, which then gets reflected on by everyone and think that, you know what, that was fucking great.
Strong answer that.
I was going to say that was a better answer than mine.
I couldn't give the same answer as you.
So we both, I mean, we're all in agreement that sales is a fundamental skill for front of house, and it is to portray the value. It's not to, like you said, put it way better than I'm going to. It's not about selling X amount of oil flushes. It's about communicating the problem to the customer in a way that they want the solution that you can offer. So with sales in mind, how important is sales training for this role? Critical.
Yeah.
Without doubt. And again, it just becomes how it's filtered in. Like, and I try and avoid using sales as a trigger word for it, because of course we want sales. We all want sales. Sales is how we grow. It's how we succeed within business, and like in this world that we live in, everything relies through sales and the transaction of money. But like it's all in experience. And it's how we manage that quality. It's not so much just getting the training and then leaving that person. It's having them back and seeing where that. How have you understood that 2 months down the line? How have you understood that 3 months down? Have you understood that 2 years down the line? What does that look like now? I know the training was done then, but obviously everyone goes off on different tracks. And obviously our job as leaders of businesses in whatever role we play is to keep everybody aligned on the same track. And I think too often we do the sales trainings. Oh yeah, they're done. They've got the qualification. They've got this. It's done. They'll go make loads of sales. But if it's not aligned with what the business is trying to portray, then those sales aren't sustainable.
No.
So it's solutions training and keep going back on what that quality looks like and how that's been interpreted from all stakeholders. I
think that sales day just scales all the way back to, what has the customer asked for? Have you listened to the customer on their first inquiry? Because, there's the active listening side to sales, whereas identifying what the customer's actually even asking you for. Yeah. We don't just service their car and upsell them whatever on it. They might say, my aircon smells a bit funny, and it's those listening to what the customer actually needs to identifying the solution for them.
And on the flip side of that is a customer will use trigger words all the time and say, look, I'm selling the vehicle, I need to get the bare minimum done. Like, there's not saying you shouldn't not offer the solutions that would still benefit to the sale of a vehicle, but you need to know that you've already thought about that thought. It's like, look, I know you're selling the vehicle in a month, but for you to get the maximum for the vehicle, the value of the vehicle, it would be great if you sold it with 2 brand new tyres on, because that customer the person that might buy the vehicle from you would probably more respect the fact that you've put new tyres on it and this vehicle is going to be something of sound.
Timing belt's a classic one for that. I'm selling the car, I want the bare minimum doing. Well, it's going to devalue if your timing belt's overdue. Yeah. Are you aware of that? I think there's a lot of things that come into that.
And it's literally just having that hospitality skill. I'm going to keep leaning on that. I'm going to beat that drum until beat the shit out of it.
And I think it does all scale back to the duty of care for the customer. You know, we can't ignore these things or shy away from these things just because we assume the customer doesn't want to know or the customer's not interested, when, there is an absolute duty of care to the role as a service advisor, as well as it being a sales role as well,
That point you just made is we can't assume what the customer wants.
Yeah, we can't. It's impossible. I've done it so many times.
But that is like a really common problem.
But you shouldn't fall on the other side and just offer them absolutely everything without any sense of awareness around that. So that's the challenge, is finding this balancing act, and this is where it comes down to the active listening and coaching the customer through. And I say this with the try not to sound arrogant, is the customer in our place is more often wrong than they are right. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to articulate what they want. They don't articulate it right on the first time more often than not. So we're here to extract the answer that we're both looking for, and that is ultimately them to leave happy with a car that works better than it did when it come in.
Yeah.
So Emma, you do a lot of the training now for us internally.
Yeah.
But what's your previous training experience, and how did that, at the time you were in that front of house role, how did that change your world when it came to that front of house role, and who did you do it with?
John Batten's front of house training was like the most inspiring training for me in this particular job role. I have done sales roles in the past outside of Lindley's. I've had some sales training with, but nothing I did business to business before, not customer facing. So that training with John Batten really inspired me. Just, what would you do if it was your grandma's vehicle? Back to that old thing, and by absolutely doing right by the customer and understanding your customer. I absolutely love that training. Really, really inspiring. And I try and do work off that, but even the training we did for Garage Hive Super User, that really inspired me. I think trainers in general are just quite inspiring. It's a hard thing to do.
It's a very hard thing to do, and I think that if people are listening to this and they have those front of house staff that might not be, in their eyes, where they want them to be, have they sent them on external training? Because most people naturally aren't very good at training people.
No.
They're not naturally inspiring, especially when there's a really strong familiarity between owner and couple of front of house. So, but sending someone away on that external thing, get them in the right headspace, get them in front of one of these inspirational trainers.
Yeah.
Because you were very experienced at the time you went to see John, wasn't you?
I've done it twice. I went on it a second time, just not to necessarily take anything away from it, just to re-inspire myself.
Yeah.
Just to come back to work on Monday thinking, right, I'm ready to go again. It was exactly the same course, but...
And was that a key turning point in your,
Probably the way I looked at front of house. I was an assistant manager at that time, and I think that really helped transcend me into, how I was going to take that role to the full extent of that role. I think at that time in Lindley's for us, I don't think anyone was taking those roles really seriously, whereas now it's like the pinnacle point of the branch. These front of house need to be on it, really, really good, really forward thinking, really efficient. There isn't much room for anything other than that now.
So to summarise then, it is important.
Very.
It's my favourite job role. I'd be a service advisor forever.
It's if I want a challenge, and I just service advise and I want to succeed.
Go sit on that front counter.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I quickly want to touch on is that we obsessed with obviously trying to make sure we're delivering the customer experience, and the one thing that you want to make sure that your team are capable of doing is running the operational system stuff very competently, and almost like that's a flex. We've had lots of people which on the face of it are very skilled and will solve the customer problem, but as soon as you throw a system in the mix on top of that, they're all of a sudden, instead of looking at you, looking at the screen, and then have lost that engagement. And that is a completely separate skill. You should be able to sort of like just do things to the side of you and still make sure you're presenting the show while those things are happening. And obviously that's the skill that we're sort of looking for when it becomes to that. And you will grow technical if you can maintain that stance.
We've had, we're going off on a bit of a tangent now, but we've had staff who had to finish what they were doing before looking up.
It's a huge problem.
Oh, yeah, painful.
But again, this comes down to, do they know what that needs to look like, and are they being taught to feel?
No, this is going back, eight plus years where we didn't know.
It still happens now.
Oh, yeah, of course it will do.
It will happen. It'll happen within my business. It'll happen within Lindley's. It'll happen within business, because I still get it if I go to a different industry. And I get all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't get me wrong, when we do this front of house training, although a lot of it is sales, customer service, it is so involved in Garage Hive.
Yeah.
And I would recommend that for anyone doing internal training, when you're doing the training or learning a process, if it involves your garage management system, get the staff practicing it and doing the process with a customer, because, you know, we do a lot on inspections. There's a lot of information recorded on jobs. They have to be able to do that in a timely manner, either, you know, customer facing or on the phone, and they have to be really, really efficient. And I think that's probably why our average age of service advisors might have come down slightly in the past 10 years, I'd say, because, you know, we are looking for that, not technical, but...
No, the general rule of thumb is the younger they are, the better they are at learning software. But you are missing the life skills of general...
And knowing what great hospitality looks like. So it's one of these things that I have a theory that I want to take people to. I want to take staff to places where they can experience hospitality.
How good it can be.
And also how bad it can be. What do you feel like when that was crap? I was at a restaurant the other day. I went with some food with Gav, and I was like, "Can I have a lime and soda?" I went. She was like, "Is that a medium? Is that a small or a medium?" Sorry, a small or a large? And I went, she goes, "It's not that much more expensive." I went, "Oh, okay." And she was, "Yeah, like one's £2.50, the other one's £4." I went, "That's not that much more expensive. That's considerably more expensive."
It's double the price.
It's almost double the price. But if you had just gone, "A large, sir," that would have been fine, and it would have been settled, and it would have been done. And that's the difference between like great hospitality and
exceptional.
And
great and bad.
Or really bad.
Yeah.
So it was just one of those that sometimes I think we take for granted that when I go out, I'm looking at these things actively. And when I look at that person delivering the same service to another client, that those people aren't thinking about that. So when we think about the way that we're doing it, we're thinking about how that sounds, whereas potentially the people that we might employ have never really thought on that level. Like, so take them out of the environment to go and experience good or bad, whichever it is, and then let's discuss that.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a cool training exercise to just tell me how the customer experience felt. What did you like? What didn't you like? And Kirsty from Auto Centre says that doing a bit of competitive analysis is really strong for front of house, in the sense that you can just call around a few places and see what you liked about the service, whether the quote come back to you or whatever. It allows you to just grow that sort of peripheral that you think that everyone's got, but they haven't.
Yeah. It's quite funny. I went to, you know, Dad's favourite Starbucks man.
Oh, we were speaking about this earlier.
Well, I went in with Paul the other day. He's been with us for a week now. And I walked in and he said to Paul, "The usual."
Yeah.
And I thought, you met him a week ago.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
He did it with me after one drink.
Yeah, crazy.
Epic. And that's a skill.
That's twice we've spoke about that man on podcasts now. That just shows though.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like I knew
he'll be working for Lindley's next time we speak about it.
The coffee's the coffee.
Yeah.
You know what you're going to get.
And so then the price is no longer the relevant factor.
Yeah. You're just going for fun. It's challenge.
It's how it makes you feel.
Just go in to change your drink.
It's how it makes you feel. That's what it's all about. And so to summarise this, you need to look at front of house in regards to how it's making people feel about the brand that they represent.
Absolutely.
That is the most important thing that anyone can take away from this. And this is something that I'm leaving here now. Press finish record on this. Headphones down. On that. Back to work. Right. How are you making people taking everyone out?
That was the tagline of my last training: is the customer service. It needs to be part of the brand. That is it. For the next 12 months, we are focusing on the customer service being the brand. Mm-hmm. You know, they could have no branding on the outside of the building, but if they come in and speak to you, they know what garage they're at.
Yeah, exactly that.
Awesome. Love it. We didn't do bad. We aimed for half an hour. We got an hour.
Perfect. Oh. Yeah, really good.
Goes quick, doesn't it? Awesome. Thank you very much for taking the time and coming on the podcast. Not that bad, is it?
No.
Not that daunting. No. Cool. Thanks, Nath. Nice one.
Thank you.
Right. See you in the next one. Cheers, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.